thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Jean Alton. I am a senior dementia educator at Alzheimer's San Diego, and I will be your moderator today. And what I want to let you know is that we are very pleased to be joined with and have as our presenter is Kim McGhee, Ms. Kim McGhee. And Kim is a well-known and well-respected attorney here in San Diego. And she is one of a rare group, as she is a certified elder law attorney. So this is, an additional certification, additional education, very specific to becoming an attorney that can guide people with regards to elder care issues. So this is important, and there's not very many elder law attorneys to be found. So we are very appreciative of Kim coming in today and, giving to us, to Alzheimer's San Diego, and therefore to all of you folks who are here with us, her time today. And that's something that we're very, very grateful for. So we are going to just have a quick look at our agenda for today. There's Kim, her picture, and there you can see her live too, I hope. And here's our agenda for today. So we're going to turn it over to Kim to start talking about advanced care planning basics and looking at, kind of what those documents are that are important for all of us to have in place, in addition to, just kind of the basic legal documents, which she will be covering in the key legal documents section of today's presentation. And then she'll be addressing some of the important questions, which is how do we pay for long-term care? What is the cost, and how do we make that happen financially? And then from there, we'll go into what are some additional resources and, what are the kind of the next steps that people need to take. So that's what we've got. And let's just see here. Before we do get started, what I want to do is a quick poll. And so what we are going to ask you to do is to, now where did my darn poll go? Is to, I'm just still looking for it, folks, is to just answer these questions as you can. And the questions are to see how many people here with us today are living with a dementia or caring for somebody who is. And I'm going to just, there we go, launch the poll. And that'll be the first question here. So you can just answer yes or no. So are you living with dementia or caring for someone who is? So you should see that in front of you. Okay, and it looks like a majority of people are living with or caring for somebody with dementia. By the way, we ask these questions because it does help guide the content. So Kim knows what areas, are important to be looking at. So yeah, almost 80% of people are either living with or caring for somebody with dementia. Are employment considerations a concern? They are for about 15% of people. Are you a veteran or do you care for a veteran? About 75% are saying no and 25% are yes. Okay, well, thank you everybody for participating in the poll. And so what that helps us with is, again, kind of determining the content in certain areas. So there you go, Kim, you've got an idea then of what to be thinking about as you go along. So, all right, and I do want to let everyone know we are recording this, so you will be able to see that in our webinar library, not immediately, but probably within a week or a week and a half. Yes, I will be sending out by email a PDF of the slides that are presented today, so you will get those as well. Okay, I think that's it. Now, I'm assuming everyone has had at least some experience with Zoom, so you know you have Q&A where you can put in your questions, and we'll hold those questions for Kim when we take a break. You also have chat where you can just shoot a message in there to all of us as well. So let's get started without further ado. So Kim, it is all yours.
Thank you. Can I just, because we've had these technical difficulties, can somebody confirm that you can hear me, either in the chat or the Q&A? Yes, you can hear me. Okay, thank you. Okay, so, okay, advanced care planning basics. Now, I want to thank first, before we really get started, I do want to thank everybody for taking the time to come. I know it's hard to do these things via remote, but it's also good because sometimes it's really hard to get out and about. But in my experience, the more knowledge you have, there's nothing that can make this disease easier, but it makes it less hard because you all of a sudden can kind of take control of an uncontrollable situation. And it really does provide that little sense of security that you may be missing or maybe really needing. So let's kind of talk about the basics. So what is advanced care planning? It's really about making decisions about the care. Ooh, we are moving. What's going on? We skipped slide. Sorry, we are just having technology problems today, but okay. Oh, it keeps going. Well, advanced care planning. So it really is who's going to make the decisions when somebody can't, right? And this can be as simple as somebody turns 18 years old. Nobody has the right to speak for anybody any longer. And who's going to talk to the doctor if there's a car accident, right? Who's going to talk to the bank to pay the phone bills? Those are the kind of things that you really need somebody to kind of plan. Who is going to be the decision maker? Who's going to be your voice? Or who's going to be the voice of your loved one when they can't have their own voice? And it could, it could be a stroke, it could be Alzheimer's, it could be a lot of different things. So it doesn't just apply there. And then one of the bigger reasons I always tell people you want to plan in advance is I'm a control freak. And the more you plan in advance, the more you control when you no longer have the ability to voice your wishes. And so that's a big reality. And it's a big decision. This is a decision that requires discussion. There's legal and financial planning. We need to communicate these. I can't tell you how many clients I have make these decisions and don't tell the decision maker that they've picked them or don't tell them what they want. I'll have clients' children call my office saying, I have no idea. My mom was getting sick. She said, I'm her power of attorney. What does that mean? And so luckily we had those documents, but a lot of times people don't have those plans in advance, and that's a big problem. So the next slide, I've lost control. Sorry, everybody. Advanced care planning is about planning for the what ifs that may occur across the entire lifespan. Again, from 18 to passing, that's what you're looking at. And it's the what ifs. They might not happen, and hopefully they won't. I like to tell people that by doing these, it's like a reverse jinx. So you kind of get that the more you plan, the less it's going to happen. I always think that's a good way to feel about it. Okay. The value, right? It reduces the need to make critical decisions during a crisis. I don't know about you, but my brain doesn't work that well in a crisis. And I really like to have a roadmap to follow. When you're in a crisis, your box can be really small because you can't think of all the different options. And so if you can plan in advance, you don't have that problem anymore. You don't have these critical decisions during a crisis. You're like, no, this is what they want. This is what I know they want. Another really big one is ensuring that the decisions that are made for you reflect your personal values and preferences. I once had a client who nominated her sister to be her healthcare agent, but because of her religious beliefs, couldn't do any of the things they wanted done for them if they got sick. And I had to question, why? And they just assumed, well, she's my closest living relative. That doesn't count. You need somebody who will follow your wishes. That is the goal. If we plan ahead, we can preserve eligibility for public benefits. We have a lot of potential care support out there, but if without planning, a lot of times those are unreachable. So if we kind of plan in advance, we can get some of these. And then you really, really want to avoid probate if at all possible. California, I always make the joke, if you don't plan, the state of California has a plan for you. And no offense to anybody in any legislature in California, but I don't want them making decisions for me. So the idea is I want to be in control, and probate in itself is just, it's time consuming, it's cumbersome, and it's expensive. And that is all. It has its positives. We've had some people who a probate was a better plan because they wanted everything court supervised and oversight and have all of the rules and regulations. They're in the minority. A lot of people really don't want to go through that long process, especially in light of the time constraints that are with the probate and the legal expenses. Next. So what are the key concepts, right? We have estate planning. There's administration of your estate, there's protection of your estate, and then there's distribution of the assets in a manner consistent with what you want, right? So what does that really mean? And estate planning, and we'll get into the details of what it is, but it's going to define how your life is going to run when you're healthy, alive, and well, when you lose capacity, or when your loved one loses capacity, and when they pass, right? So administration and protection, this involves when you're alive, and that's really important. I think people think of estate planning as death planning, but it's not. It's planning for your disability. It's planning for when you're alive and well, and it's planning for a disability, and it's also planning for distribution to somebody else. The benefits of planning, it determines the eligibility for public benefits, right? What is there? What can we qualify for? We in California have Medi-Cal. We'll get into the details, and it's just our version of Medicaid. We also have, there's veterans benefits planning. There's some Social Security planning. How do we prevent running out of money while we still need it? How do we maximize what's available with what we have? And then the next one is the special needs planning, which is protective planning for individuals with developmental disabilities, or any type of disability that occurs when somebody needs to rely on public benefits, and they're generally under the age of 64 or something like that. So you'll see special needs planning in the world of where I'm planning for a child that may have autism, or maybe I had a child that or somebody, my loved one was in a car accident that now they were dependent on public benefits throughout their whole life. Those kind of things you want to kind of plan for. How do we deal with allowing people to qualify for public benefits and still have other assets to supplement what those public benefits don't provide? So the next one we go to is capacity, right? The issue we have with capacity is it's the capability or the fitness to perform an action or enter into a legal agreement. It's the ability to comprehend the nature and consequences of one's actions. This is a really hard one because people want to think it's a fixed. There's a moment in time where they lack capacity. Oh, they have a diagnosis. That is not true. And I need everybody to understand that California Probate Code 810, you are presumed to have capacity. That's where you start. And Probate Code 811 specifically says a diagnosis alone is insufficient to deem you to lack capacity. So I could have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, of dementia, of some other neurocognitive disorder, but that doesn't mean I have no capacity to make decisions in my life, to direct the decisions in my life, and even to enter into legal contracts. What it means is that if I lack capacity, it means that diagnosis or that disability impacts my ability to understand the nature and consequences of the specific decision I'm trying to do. So I may be able to do one thing, but I might not be able to do another. And so that's it. I don't want people to think that they have this diagnosis and the world is over, because a lot of people, they think that, and because they think that, they hide from it and they don't admit their failings. And by preventing people from helping you earlier, you are going to end up requiring more care and dependent on more, and you're going to lose control. But the people that allow to support say, look, I got this diagnosis, and yes, it impacts my ability to do math and to balance my checkbook. But I know I need to balance my checkbook. I know I have my bills to pay. I can still do all these things. Or maybe I'm forgetting what day of the week it is. And I'm forgetting that maybe I've already done something. But that doesn't mean you lose the ability to do it. You just need some support to do it. So the next we have is conservatorship. Other states usually call it guardianship, and it's a court proceeding. Again, I call it more of like a lawsuit that you file against your loved one to take away their legal rights. But really, it is a court proceeding, an individual, so it's mostly family members. They're appointed to care for an adult unable to attend to their personal needs or finances. Meaning, people know because of Britney Spears, and that's usually how people know about it. But if somebody had a major stroke without any planning in place, they can no longer make any decisions. Then without a document in place, you have to go to court and get a conservatorship to help that person make the decisions with the doctor, with the finances. So the idea is you want to try to prevent that by pre-planning. So what are the key legal documents? So I talked about the estate plan. So an estate plan. A good estate plan, I'm going to start with power of attorney, even though that's the third on the list, because when you turned 18, that was what you were supposed to do. Nobody does, right? But some people do, because I make the joke, my children, they're still minors. And when they turn 18, they get two things: powers of attorney and a kick out the door. But the reality is I get in a lot of fights with my friends' children who turn 18, and I say, for your birthday, I'm giving you powers of attorney, yay. And they're like, I don't need it, Mrs. McGhee. And I say, well, okay, what happens if you're in a car accident? And they're like, well, my mom can talk to the doctor. And I said, well, no, they can't. There's something called HIPAA. And we learned how important it was to have these documents during COVID, right? If your loved one is in the hospital and you're in the hall crying, of course, a nurse is going to have pity on you and tell you what's going on. But during COVID, we had the situation where spouses would call my office and they say, my husband's in the hospital. I've been married for 64 years. I don't know if he's alive or dead because the hospital can't tell me. Right. And that was something that people didn't ever anticipate having. And so if you have a power of attorney for healthcare, which, California, we call advanced healthcare directives. It used to be called the healthcare proxy and the living will. So we keep changing the name, but it's really designated power and agent for your healthcare. And so that's important to have. And then I also explained to these 18-year-olds who have nothing, do you have a phone? And they say, well, yes. And I said, if you're in a car accident and nobody can access it, pay your bill, pay your iCloud, do all those things, and you lose everything, and now you can't access your TikToks or whatever. And then they freak out and they say, I'll sign anything. But that's the durable power for asset management. You don't have to have a big estate. You just need to have legal authority to sign your name. And that's an 18-year-old. So that was where people should start. And it's fine if you don't have it yet, let's get it in place. And then if you have a piece of real property in California, if you have any assets over 183,400, I can't remember the exact number, 183,000-ish. It's a number that's indexed for inflation, so it goes up. But if you have more than that, and they're not payable on death, or they end up in your estate, you're going to go to probate, which, what did we just say? It's a lawsuit that you file against yourself after you've died in favor of your creditors and your lawyer. And it's really time consuming. But really what it is it's a process by which a judge decides who can sign your name. So for example, you own a home and you want to sell it. What do? Sign your name. Well, what can't you do when you're dead or incapacitated? Sign your name. And so that's what a trust is going to do. A trust really defines who can sign your name under certain circumstances. When I'm alive and well, I can sign my name. If I lose capacity, I appoint this person to sign my name. They're called the trustee. And then if I'm dead, usually the same person can sign my name. And in that trust, you're also going to define where things go, right? How are they, while I'm alive, how did they get used for me? And you can put in there, you can be as detailed as you want. I want all of my money to be spent on me and all of my care. I have other people who say, I want to leave a legacy to my children, so put me on Medi-Cal, right? Everybody is a little bit different, and there's no right or wrong answer. And people's values will decide how you write their trust. And so if you have a trust, you're going to want a pour over will. If you don't have a trust, you're at least going to want a will. Now, the difference is a pour over will, it's a silly name, but it's like a catch-all document. It catches, I'll just pull up a document. It catches something that's held outside your trust and it pours it into it. So it leaves everything to your trust. So your trust becomes the document that says where to go, $10,000 to Johnny, $10,000 to Sarah, everything else split, the rest, a third to my kids. The will, if you don't have a trust and you don't think you need a trust, then at least the will, you can define where things go. Who will handle things when I die? Like the will, I get a lot of calls saying I'm the executor of my mom's estate. And I say, oh, I'm so sorry for your loss. And they say, oh, my mom's not dead. And I say, well, then you can't be the executor of anything, because a will only becomes effective when somebody dies and it's admitted to probate, but we're not going to get into the little nitty gritties. So next. So when I talked about the power of attorney for healthcare, I did talk about, it's also known as the Advanced Healthcare Directive. And we used to call them the living wills. And so that's kind of where, just to be confusing, we were confusing back then. But now we have an Advanced Healthcare Directive. What that does is it appoints your healthcare agent, and then it lists your wishes, right? It's the place where you can put all of those things. How expensive of life-sustaining measures do I want? What kind of things do I want? What kind of things do I not want? Do I want to be cremated? Do I want to donate my organs? It can be as detailed or as generic as you want. I highly recommend you make it detailed, because the people who are going to follow it, number one, it's unlikely that you are very detailed to them verbally. Please do that. I can tell you I've had to pull the plug twice now, and I get to say that it was the hardest things I've ever done. I knew it was the right decision. And I spend a lot of time with people after they've had to pull the plug on their loved ones, and they didn't know. They didn't know if it was the right choice. So the more detailed you can be, the better. And I like to give the example of, paint a picture for your loved ones about what their quality of life should look like. Right? My mom was very clear about, if I can't hold that baby, sing to that baby, love on that baby, I don't want to live like that. She painted me a picture. My dad painted the picture of, what kind of dependent person he would be and where we were to allow it to get to, right? So that was kind of thing. I mean, I've got some clients that are like, I can be 100% dependent. You're going to wipe my, and you're going to keep me alive in all circumstances. And I have other people are like, if I got to hang now, push me off of the roof of the hospital. Right. So everyone's a little bit different. And there's no right or wrong answer. It's very personal. And when I said HIPAA earlier, it's the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. We want to waive that for certain people in our life. To be honest, the more people that you have in your life, the more likely there's going to be conflict. And so if you've got a child that's kind of managing everything, if you give the other children a HIPAA waiver, it now allows them to access your medical records in the crisis so that there's no control fighting, right? I've got a lot of cases where, when a parent gets ill or a spouse gets ill, people get weird. And rightly so, because it's very emotional. And so you kind of want to plan for that. I hear, oh, that wouldn't happen in my family. Of course, it would never happen in anyone's family, but it happens in almost everyone's family. It's unique to not happen as opposed to the reverse, right? So, give people access to things so that you don't have people fighting. I have one case right now where I think the child is just so scared of losing her mom that she's holding on so tight that the other children, all they want is to, if their mom's in the hospital, to call and find out how she's doing. But she's not giving that. She's like, oh no, I'm the power of attorney. You have to go through me. And I think that's her way of trying to control the situation, but you can't control an uncontrollable situation. So do that for your loved ones. If you're the caregiver, try to figure out how to make this so that you, because you fell asleep or because you're so upset you turned your phone off, or you just needed a break, you didn't not respond to somebody in 5 hours and they didn't hire a lawyer, right? Try to be mindful of life's not going to go the way you think it is. So how can we put these documents in place so that I don't have to do it perfectly, and you can have what you need, but you still don't usurp my wishes. So we also have do not resuscitate orders, the DNR. The DNR is usually within the Advanced Healthcare Directive, but we have a lot of older documents that are out there, and some people can sign a separate do not resuscitate. And then the physician's order for life-sustaining treatment. I really like this document, but I think some physicians overuse it. It's intended to be used after a certain age or when you're 1 year away from death. Now, how do you know that? I don't know. But the idea is you can tell because you have some sort of terminal illness. And the reason why I don't like the overuse is because it's an order. Meaning, if it says do not resuscitate on it, the paramedic will watch you die. Right. And well, what if you change your mind? So, and because you filled it out 4 years ago and you're like, well, no, I know that they can cure this now. Right. There's a lot of different reasons why I don't like the use of it too much, but I do love the use of it when it's appropriate. And so I call it the pink paper. And if you say the pink paper, most medical professionals know what you're talking about. Next. Okay. This is a bigger issue that I run into. I have a lot of clients who will have plans from the 90s and then never did anything about it. And everybody they nominated has passed away and nothing works like it's supposed to. So you want to always maintain these documents. These are not, granted, yes, you can put them together and stick it on a shelf and they can live on the shelf for a while, but you want to review things, right? You want to pay attention to the news or well, at least maybe you don't, because I don't want to either, but you want to pay attention to changes in tax laws. Those are usually kind of thrown in your face, or, stay in contact with your planning attorney or your CPA, your tax professional. I always think that's a good time is when you're paying taxes. You have to do that every year. Ask, has there been any big changes in estate taxes and things that I need to talk to my lawyer about? But the reality is I tell people, depending on your age, every 5 years, you can look at it. That's a good range. Just pull it down off the shelf, look at it, make sure everybody's still alive and everybody's right for the right jobs, and then put it back away. Or if you're, older and things are happening in your life, or you have an illness or something, you feel like the Grim Reaper is kind of getting closer, you might want to pull it every year and just take a look at it to make sure it's still right. But when there's major life events, that is a good time. That is a really good time, right? Major life events, births, deaths, but really any impactful thing that's happened in your life where your named agents, the people that you have put in place to make your healthcare decisions or to do your money decisions, make sure that when they've had an event and participated in it, they rose to the occasion and didn't run away. Right. I always like to tell this to my personal stories. When my father had a health event, I saw how my nominated backup healthcare agent acted. The next morning, I went and removed him. I was like, this is not somebody that can be making decisions in a crisis. I didn't know that, but the crisis had to happen for me to learn that. You sometimes get to see the behaviors. I always like to tell people when they're trying to pick their person and they've got a couple children and they're, oh, it's not just the firstborn son. That's not the right answer. It's not the caregiving daughter or whatever. It's the person that's good for the job, because it's a job. It really is. And it helps when you kind of take the rose-colored glasses off and you say, who's good at the job? And to be honest about it, because this is going to be a crisis and you're going to want the right person for the right job at the right time. Beneficiary designations. I want to go back to that one real quick. It's really important that we regularly check those. The reason why is that, companies get bought, companies get sold, companies create, put in new document management systems and all sorts of software. And so if I'm not saying it's happened. Well, okay, it has happened. People who I can prove sent in a beneficiary designation form isn't the same as when they died, right? It was removed and it looked like, oh, they had a software and a software change, and then the change didn't follow with it. And then please let somebody know where the documents may be located. We as lawyers, we have this list, it's called listserv, right? A bunch of lawyers, we all email each other all the time with questions or inquiries. And you see this a lot. Does anybody have the estate plan for so-and-so? Well, we're not allowed to answer that. Even if we did. There's a lot of attorney-client privilege issues, but the idea is you really can't. And so make sure somebody knows where it is. That is very helpful. Okay, so next I think we're going to go to some questions.
Yes.
Okay, so I
There.
see.
Yeah, Kim, we've got some good questions.
Okay, I see. So if nothing is in place, does that responsibility automatically go to spouse or oldest child? No. So we have a new rule that came into effect January 1st, which is kind of maybe is the answer. So the law is if you don't have a decision maker, you have to go to get a court order. That's the law. And there's two different ways to do it. There's a conservatorship, and then there's a smaller way, which is a 3102 petition. And that's a petition where you're asking the court for permission to do one thing, right? One medical treatment, one something like that. And so people think it's the spouse or the oldest child, but it's not. There is a new statute that says in a healthcare scenario, the hospital or other healthcare facility can nominate a surrogate from the list of a bunch of people based on what they believe to be correct. I have never seen it been used. Like I've seen something similar been used in the past, but it's usually in a crisis, like a real fast crisis, because we need something decided. And then there's go get a court order for everything else. So no, it just doesn't fall on the next person. And the spouses, that one was shocking for most people. You're referring to the medical and end of life decisions to the spouse or the oldest child. Yes, there is when it's not the end of life, but I believe, now don't quote me on this one, but if you don't have anything in place, the remains, there is a order for who can deal with the remains of somebody without documents in place.
Yeah. And then a quick question that's just above that, is, Air Force Reserve considered to be a veteran?
It depends if you were ever called to active duty. So I don't know the legal term when it would come to veteran on that, but when we're talking about public veterans benefits, in order for the long-term care veterans benefit, you had to have been called to active duty for 1 day during wartime service and 90 days total. And we're going to get into what those dates are in the future, in the future slides. Is there any other questions?
There's the one about the difference between the trust and the will, but I think you explained that. Yeah.
I wasn't able to scroll. Here we go.
Yeah.
What's the difference between a trust and a will? Yeah. So yeah, the trust, I just want to make sure it was clear. The trust defines the successor manager, and they're called the successor trustees, but I like to just use the term manager. So the trust is who can sign my name when I can't, and that's all. And a will, it's a direction of who can sign my name, meaning a judge has to appoint that person. It doesn't become automatic. Like the trust is an automatic based on an agreement I make with myself when somebody can act. The will becomes effective when a judge admits it to probate and decides who can be the manager of that trust, which would be the manager of that will, which would be the executor or personal representative, depending on the circumstances. Sometimes a lot of this is just like definition. So I'm trying to be as more generic as I can, but then people get mad because it's like, you said this. So I'm trying to be as detailed at the same time. So with all the trust monies in the house and there's no money left other than a loan, is there some other way to access the money? You mean like the equity in the house, I'm assuming.
Yeah, that's how I'm reading it.
So really the only way to pull equity out of a home would be through a reverse mortgage, which is, that's an option. You need to be very mindful with a reverse mortgage because the equity gets burned up really fast if we do that. So I generally recommend people to fully understand the terms and not get rushed through. I never recommend people take out lump sums unless you have to have a lump sum. It's better to kind of treat it as a line of equity because the reverse mortgage compounds its interest on itself. And so you eat up a lot of the equity faster. You, if possible, you can get a line of credit, which is usually going to be a lower interest rate. And it's also going to allow for, not the compounding of interest, but you will have a payment that'll have to start coming, but you can kind of pull out a little. Other than that, without selling the home, there's no other way.
And now we have one last good question is, for any of these key legal documents, if a power of attorney or a trustee only has signed copies and not originals of those documents, is that okay? What if you can't find the originals?
Okay, a will in particular has to be the original. Otherwise, you have to somehow prove that the original wasn't destroyed. So that's a document that you need the original. The power of an attorney and the trust, I'm going to say it depends, because financial institutions will accept copies. Some will require the original. Some hospitals and doctors will accept the copy. Others will require the original. The county recorder's office, if you need to do something through them, they require the original. Trusts are the same way. It's really up to the specific financial institution. It's up to the title rep when it comes to securing title on a selling of a house. And that's the problem, right? A lot of trusts, like our trust, we put in there that I can authenticate an original, or my successor, that this office can authenticate an original. So sometimes there's some provisions in there, or if you go back to the original attorney, they might be able to authenticate it. But the answer is just, it depends, because I've seen it both ways, where I've seen the requirement that it be original and I've seen that they'll take the copy. But when you have the will, that does have to be the original. So I always I'd make the joke with our staff or our clients, don't run back in for your trust or your powers of attorney because we can authenticate them, run back in for your will, but don't really save yourself.
Good.
The next question,
this one seems to be about capacity. Mother was diagnosed.
Okay, so the question is, my mother was recently diagnosed with severe Alzheimer's, but she believes that she was not, and she's definitely capable of voicing her desires. How do I get her attorney to work with her? So the issue with that is capacity is a hard one, right? And there's a lot of attorneys who don't want to deal with it. And maybe that's not the right thing to say. They're not as educated in capacity. So estate planners and elder law attorneys are a little different on that. An elder law attorney, we focus a lot of what we do on the capacity side of the planning, and so a lot of attorneys refer their clients who have a diagnosis to a different elder law attorney because they're just not comfortable with the legal standards. And there's a law out there that says that as the lawyer, my judgment carries a lot of weight on whether somebody has capacity, because a medical diagnosis, again, is different than legal capacity. So you can't force an attorney to do anything that they don't want to do. If they don't believe it's going to be held up, or if they don't believe that their client can adequately direct their representation, they should not accept that representation. But sometimes, and I think I understand where you're coming with this, is, I teach a course on how to communicate with people with a disability. And I've had a client with Alzheimer's who, it was advanced, but the way her Alzheimer's presented is that if you wrote, she could write, like she could, the thoughts, the rationally, she could communicate and rationalize the nature and consequences of decisions. And it was amazing in writing, but she couldn't verbalize it. So we were able to participate in writing. So you kind of a lot of times is maybe, the one person is able to communicate better, and that's where there's that conflict. So it might just be trying to find somebody who's better at the capacity issues, but because a lot of times it is, an attorney doesn't want to do planning if it's just going to be overturned, and then they're going to, have to deal with the consequences.
Right. Thanks, Kim. I think we'll move along now and let you start looking at the next section, which is how do we pay for long-term care?
Oh,
Big question.
yes, the hard part.
Yep. Here we go.
Okay, strategies for financing long-term care. So what is long-term care? I mean, that's it's a little vague, right? Long-term, and it's commonly known as custodial care because it's not like a skilled nursing level of care. It's not, I need this constant wound care. It's I just need somebody to kind of keep control, like make sure that they're protected from themselves, the basics, food, clothing, getting incontinence, getting to and from the bathroom, those kind of things, mobility issues. So it's the non-medical side of dealing with people with physical and cognitive disabilities. And what is it? Where do you look for it, right? There's 3 different kinds. So I'm going to start with skilled nursing. That's the convalescent homes. That's the hospital-like setting. That is the place that nobody ever really wants to go to. We want to avoid it at all costs. Unfortunately, it's not likely for a lot of us, because if we have a major fall, stroke, some sort of severe issue that impacts our mobility and requires a high level of care, we're going to end up in a hospital, and that hospital, they're going to treat the situation and then they're going to discharge you. Most times people can't go home from there, and that they end up in a skilled nursing facility. Hopefully a bit of rehab will get them back to more mobility, or more, some physical therapies will help them be able to do things to get to the lower level of care, but not all the time. So that's the skilled level. There's then community-based, and then there's residential care. So the community-based would be like in-home care. Adult day programs. There's also PACE, which is San Diego. Almost all of San Diego County is covered by it, but it's I can't remember what it stands for off the top of my head right now.
Program for all-inclusive care for the elderly.
Thank you. And so what it does is it helps people live in their home, right? It provides additional services so people can stay in their home, right? There's in-home care, and that is through, you can pay privately for it. You can qualify under Medi-Cal and in-home supportive services. And that's where, you've got a spouse maybe, or a child that's coming in to take care of you. You bring in private caregivers or Medi-Cal covered caregivers, 4 to 8 to 16 hours a day, sometimes 24 hours a day. Then you also have adult day programs. I find this a very good option when you have one primary caregiver and not a lot of funds for respite. And if you don't know what respite is, it's because you need it. That's my joke, I say, but it's real. Respite is taking a break. It's getting a caregiver to come in and support you. It's having somebody go for a weekend at a facility. But adult day programs are phenomenal for this purpose, right? So I've got clients who are, both spouses, right? One spouse is still working. So during the day, that they put the spouse with Alzheimer's is in a day program. Or we've got children who are still working, and so during the day, or they just need a break. So during the day, the loved one goes to a day program, and at night they're watched by their caregiver. And then PACE is a great program that kind of has more things, right? They have day programs. They can help manage multiple things. They also have transportation issues. They have, food. There's a lot of other things that PACE provides. So it's always a good way to kind of support being in your own home. But then we have residential care, and that would be your assisted livings, right? Their residential care facilities for the elderly is the name that kind of oversees them. And there's boarding cares, which are private homes that have 6 beds or less that are turned into care facilities. And that is a great opportunity for somebody who wants intimate care, likes the smaller environment. And I like it for the fact that it is like the caregivers get to know you, because it's usually 3 or 4 of the same ones that are coming in and out. They really get to know your needs, your wants, your likes, your dislikes. But some people don't like it because it's too small. Then so they like the assisted living. And I say those are more like the condo-like living, right? They're apartment building types that have the restaurant and the care facilities. Those are really good for the people that want their own bedrooms and their own autonomy. You can get studios, 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms, and they can have kitchenettes and things like that. And then you have memory care, and memory care will be your secure perimeter facility. So a locked facility that is going to be usually smaller than an assisted living, but bigger than a boarding care. So it kind of depends. Some of them are really big. Most of them are a little more community, like smaller, but they're specifically created for people with cognitive disorders. Next. Cost. So this is where I'll start with the in-home care. If you want 24-hour care in your home with a constant, like the same caregiver, or 1 or 2 caregivers, you're looking at $35,000 a month. California has wage and hour laws that require your caregivers to be paid when they're sleeping. They require time and a half after 8 hours, double time after 16 hours. So if you want in-home care and you don't have $35,000, you're going to need 3 caregivers coming in and out, but you're probably still looking at about $22,000 a month. So it's really cost prohibitive for most people. Adult day programs, those can range. If you're on Medi-Cal, I've seen somebody pay, $5 a visit. I've found somebody on a veterans plan was able to do it for $20 a day. And then but they're usually, they range in so much, so I can't really give an idea, but they're a great option when considering you could be spending $35 an hour for an in-home caregiver. It's a really good option. PACE is generally through Medi-Cal, so it's whatever your share of cost is going to be. Your residential care, your boarding cares. I have seen good ones even start at $2,500. I've seen them go up to $10,000 a month. It just depends. It depends location. Here in San Diego, you got to remember things are more expensive on the coast than they are inland for the same service. So be mindful of that when looking at them. When you look at the cost doesn't necessarily mean the best. Think of the care, like get to know the people, see who's running it, because a lot of times people can create good businesses for less cost and they can run it well. So it just kind of depends. Assisted livings, those usually range from, depending on the care needs, $3,500 to, again, I've seen $14,000 a month. And then memory cares are usually more expensive. I don't know of anyone that's a little below $5,000 a month, but there might be one. I just can't think of one. And those can range up to $15,000 a month. Skilled nursing, that is again, extremely expensive. The average private pay rate in California right now is about $11,000 something. That's average against all of California. So San Diego's running average, $12,500 to about $17,000 a month. How do we pay for that? I mean, I just gave you some crazy numbers. Sometimes, it's your personal savings and the assets you have. A lot of people pay for care with their home. That's the problem, right? Most people have this home and they want to leave it to the legacy with their home, but that's the only asset they have. And that's where, when I talked about reverse mortgages, that's the scary part. So I have a lot of clients who I have to give bad news to because they pulled out reverse mortgages throughout their life, went to the casino, and they don't have equity left. And unfortunately, now, I have to be the bearer of bad news that they're going to end up being fully dependent on a Medi-Cal facility. And even though they had this great asset. So I always just want people, when you start thinking reverse mortgages, be mindful of the impact it has on the equity in that asset. If you have long-term care insurance, good job, right? It's really, really hard to purchase right now. It's almost like the joke is, if you can afford long-term care insurance, you wouldn't need long-term care insurance. But if you had purchased it before, then it's good. Make sure do whatever it takes to keep that going. So the financial tools, reverse mortgages, I'm not saying they're bad. I'm really not, because I recommend them a lot as part of a plan. I'm just saying that I've had a lot of people not use them wisely. And the reverse mortgages, some of the agents that sell them are not, they're not as involved in the long-term care of your life. There's also charitable gift annuities, which if you have, this is really good for people who have things like highly appreciated assets, because you can turn it into a stream of income tax-free, which is phenomenal, or tax limited. And then we can also convert life insurance. I have never stopped paying on your life insurance because you can't afford it. Try to sell it, right? If you can't pay for it anymore, there is a way to convert it to actual cash. Somebody will buy it from you. It's a gamble they're going to take that they'll get the payout, but it can be a great thing. Then most people do rely on Medicaid, which California we call Medi-Cal. And then if you are a veteran, you can get some supplemental care or reimbursement of care costs through the VA. I know everybody's like, well, I have Medicare, I'm fine. No, Medicare is a health insurance. Medicare pays for your doctor visits like a health insurance. It pays for the hospital visit like a health insurance. You then have to either have a supplement for the difference that Medicare doesn't cover, because it's usually only 80% of the cost, or you can have a Advantage plan, and that covers everything through Medicare. But it doesn't pay for long-term care. It pays for day 1 through 20 in a skilled nursing facility under certain circumstances, which you've been hospitalized for 3 days or more, things like that. And then it will pay at 80% from day 21 to 100, but it's only if you need skilled level of care, meaning you need medical coverage, not custodial coverage. And that's the difference. And that's why people get confused thinking Medicare is going to cover it, but they don't. They're just your medical insurance. So if you need custodial care, which is what most of our cognitive impairments are going to need, they're going to need a supported environment. They're going to need a protected environment. They're going to need help with cooking, bathing, dressing, toileting. Those are not medical needs. Those are custodial needs. Tax deductible expenses. Now, sometimes, you'll see I'm, not only am I a control freak, I'm a bit of a geek. So I really like to play with these expenses and taxes to the extent we can, because we can usually, if done right, utilize them to help. So a lot of the home health care and long-term care expenses can be tax deductible. So it's really important that you don't do any of this in a vacuum, right? You're overwhelmed. Caregiving is the most overwhelming part of anyone's life. And I don't think anybody's going to convince me otherwise. And so get help, rely on professionals who are good at their jobs, right? In-home care service, custodial or skilled, residential care, all of these are tax deductible to certain extents. And so let's say we have different assets. We want to utilize them properly, right? Let's say if we have to use an IRA, you have to pay income tax on money coming out of that. But if we have tax deductible expenses, we can offset that. Now, all of a sudden, we get to keep more money. So, and that we need for our care. So you kind of want to look at it, long-term care insurance premiums, modifications to the home. People don't realize that, if I need to do some changes to stay home, maybe I can get a tax deduction. So I always tell people, don't be penny wise, pound foolish. I think it was what it is. Get some help. People do this all day long. This is the first time you're doing this. So reach out to people who know what they're doing and get the help. You might save some money. Next. Okay. So employment. I think we may have had 1 or 2 people that want to talk about this. So I'm going to all explain it, but the issue is, if you get dementia or some sort of major neurocognitive disorder while you're working, what can you do? There are things to do, right? When do we disclose it? How do we disclose it? It is a disability, and there are rights and protections in place for that. Not disclosing it and it impacting your work such that you get fired That's the bad thing, right? There's some employment lawyers who will really work with you. Like you can request accommodations. I had a gentleman, he was a veterinarian. He was diagnosed early. He no longer could do surgery, but he still could do a lot of things in a veterinary practice. And so there was accommodations for it. And then there's also a bunch of different programs that are available, right? There's an employee assistance programs, there's short-term and long-term disability issues. We also have, California and the feds, we have the Family Leave Medical Act or Family Medical Leave Act benefits. And then a lot of times there's early retirement options. Getting fired is not the answer, but looking to see what else is available is a really good idea. Something that's really, really important that gets lost in the shuffle a lot is the compassionate allowances. Compassionate allowances, in the event that you are under 65, and so you're applying for Social Security Disability Insurance, your SSDI, and Supplemental Security Income Disability. And so there's certain medical conditions where you can get priority, because otherwise sometimes these things it can take 2 years before you can get your Medicare and all sorts of things. So the compassionate allowances is if you're on the list, and I think that's the next slide, if memory serves. Yes. So if you have any of these, then you can be pushed up the list to get these benefits. And it's important because a lot of times, especially if you are like the wage earner in your home, getting on these benefits sooner is going to really impact and protect the family unit. Slide. Veterans benefits. Okay, we do have some veterans watching. So a veteran, there's lots of benefits that, when you were discharged, you got like a little booklet. I don't know when you were discharged, it could have been that little, could have been that little, but you really didn't get to learn what your benefits were. So I always, say, take a trip down to the good old VA and find out what it is, right? There's different kinds. Your medical, your health insurance and your medical care, that is with the VA medical side. Then there's the benefit side, which are two different. People think they talk to each other. They don't. Their computer systems are two unique environments. They do not connect. So people think, well, if, I'm injured or they know that I have this diagnosis, then they'll automatically just give me benefits over here. That's not how the veterans work. The veteran systems work. So you want to always consider that and inquire what you have. So there's service connected disability, and then there's pension benefits. And those are two different kinds. Service connected disability income or benefits are related to, I was injured during my service. Now, it's not just I was shot during a war. It is I burned my hand in a mechanic shop while I was on active duty, not on base, but at a friend's mechanic shop, but I was still on active duty. That is actually service-connected disability if it then created some sort of long-term disability, like, maybe now, as you were fine when you were 18, but now as you age, you can't close your hand. That is a service-connected disability. I had one client who came in and hunched over, just barely could walk, and early 70s, not old at all. And he was telling me the story about when he was at basic training. He was in the Air Force and he was at an Army base, or he was in the Army at an Air Force base. I can't, but they thought he wasn't the guy, the same branch. They thought it'd be funny to put extra charges in the whatever it was, like some training vehicle. They put extra charges, shot him up, broke his back, and he was fine as an 18-year-old, as a 20-year-old, as a 30-year-old. But as he turned 40 and 50, his back started to degenerate. And it was because of that. Well, he had a service-connected disability that he didn't know. And so he just came in for estate planning. I told him to go down to the VA because this is a real obvious one. And he's like, well, I use the VA medical for my medical. And it's like, I don't care. They don't talk to the benefits people. Go apply to the benefits people. And he did, and he gets a check every month now. So that works out well. Pension benefits, there is traditional. So if you work 20 years, you get your benefits. But what we like to talk about in the long-term care world is the non-service connected benefits, right? That is where I didn't get shot. I didn't get hurt. Nothing happened to me during my service, but I did serve for 90 days in active duty, and one of those days was during a wartime period. And now I can't remember if we do have those periods in the slides. But basically, it's longer than you think, right? There was World War II, there's Korea, there's Vietnam, the Gulf War. We're actually still in the Gulf War, just so you know. They haven't given an end date to it. So there is a range. It's, if we don't have them in the slides, I apologize. You can Google it. You say, non-service connected pension benefits, VA, wartime periods. Google will pop it right up. You've got the death pensions. So, when somebody passed away, you've got your leftover, you've got your DIC. So let's say you are the spouse of a veteran that was receiving service-connected disability, and they died either because of the disability or after a period of time with it. There's a dependent indemnity compensation that the spouse and even minor children or disabled children would be entitled to. And then there's the VA Caregiver Support Program. I love this program only because it's my clients that have participated in it have gotten access to a lot more things that I didn't even know existed, or that are not advertised, or that are just like a pilot program, or, just happen to be available. And I had one client qualify for $20 a day programs because of it. Others had beds open up in really phenomenal facilities and was covered by the VA. So, participating with them and getting involved, I know it's frustrating because, it takes 5 forms to order a pen. I'm just kidding, but it kind of does. Now imagine to get free stuff. So, or assistance with payment. So you do have to play and work through their rules and guidelines, but a lot of times there's a lot more. And we are in San Diego, so we do have more than most people do. And we do have a better system here in San Diego than most other counties and states. So going to the caregiver support program, you've got your adult health, you've got, the home-based primary care programs, so keeping people at home. How do we do that? A lot of time is, the caregiver needs so much support. Like, what can we do to provide that? And can there be a home health aide that can come in and support the homemaker? The telehealth, I think that's become a phenomenal way for people to access respite. Again, I said, if you don't know what respite is, you need it. It's okay to take a weekend. It really is. Because you always think of the flight attendant's golden rule: put your oxygen mask on first so you can save those around you. If you don't get some help and take a break, you will not continue. And what's your loved one going to do when you fall apart? So I'm just saying that because I know you need to hear it, and tell everyone else that you know too. There's also skilled home care services, so you can, get some more support at home. And there's also home hospice. And if you don't know what hospice is, that's also another good option when people are in their final days, and that's a doctor determination. Hospice, number one, is great for the caregivers because it's always better for the caregivers than anyone else. Not only do they get support with more nursing or more, products, but they get their own support too. And we need support, especially when we're going through things like this. Medicare. So I talked about Medicare as it's not a long-term care payment source, but it is very important, and it needs to be understood in this whole putting all the puzzle pieces together, right? So your Medicare, it's the health insurance paid out of your Social Security, right? You get every year, you get this is what your Social Security benefits are going to be. This is how much we're taking for Medicare every month. It, regardless of, as long as you've paid into the system, or your spouse has paid into the system, or you're a disabled adult child of somebody who's paid into the system. A DAC is a special person who had to be disabled before the age of, I think 22, could be 26. I can never remember. Some of the programs have different rules. But what it really is you've got your Part A and your Part B, and that's what's coming out of Social Security automatically. Well, once you have to enroll. But that's your hospital insurance and medical insurance. There's the Part C, D, and F, and that's really the Part C. You can have your supplementals. Part D is your drug coverage, right? The donut hole. And then F, G, and N are the Medicare supplement, the Medigaps plan. And then again, there's also the Advantage plans. But I don't want anybody to misunderstand and not hear me before. It doesn't cover the cost of long-term custodial care. It will only cover limited nursing care issues. Medicaid. This is what we call Medi-Cal, right? Nothing more than we're California and we like to be special. Massachusetts is also special. I think they're MedMass, and somebody else is also special. But California is really special in Medi-Cal world because we have rules that nobody else does. So everything I say today will not apply in Arizona. It won't apply in Nevada. It won't apply in Massachusetts. It won't apply in Florida. It won't apply in Delaware. So if you're talking to your sibling or you're talking to somebody, or if you are considering a move, these rules are not going to be the same. So this is California specific. So Medicaid or Medi-Cal is a needs-based program that's funded with the state and federal funds together. So it provides free or low-cost health coverage for children and adults with limited income or resources. And it also pays for medically necessary health services. But we're talking more in the long-term care world. So I really want to make sure that you understand this is just California. It's providing protections mainly for the middle class. And so a lot of people think of Medi-Cal as a poor person program, and it's not. It is the long-term care side in particular of Medi-Cal was created, number one, for spousal protections. The original legislation has something to end the pauperization of spouses in its language. But it really is providing protections, and I'm going to show you why in the next couple slides. So how do you become eligible? There's certain automatic. So if you're getting SSI, you are, if you are, right? That's supplemental security income. It's not regular as Social Security. It's not when you turn 65. It's a different type of Social Security. And then if individuals whose income make them ineligible for public benefits may also qualify as medically needy if the income and resources are with Medi-Cal limits. So there's a lot of guidelines on that. But one of the things we're going to really kind of walk through is share of cost, spending down, and estate recovery. Now, there are a lot of major changes happening right now. I'm so sorry. And they're not actually implemented as we speak. Some of them are, some of them aren't, but they're coming down the pike. So let's move to the next slide. I think I explained share of costs. I don't. Let me, well, I think I do. But so Medi-Cal for the long-term care. There's in-home supportive services. If you qualify for Medi-Cal, please also try to qualify for in-home supportive services. We call it IHSS. You'll hear IHSS. I'm an IHSS worker. What's your IHSS? What it is there's a certain amount of hours that Medi-Cal, a social worker for Medi-Cal, can qualify you for to pay for in-home care. And that could be a child, it could be a neighbor, it could be somebody that you get through Medi-Cal. They'll pay minimum wage in the county in which you are. So I think we're at $16 an hour. And so that's phenomenal to get some sort of supplemental care. I think it maxes out at 283 hours a month. But it is needs-based, really needs-based. They are going to evaluate how many hours you really need. So if you're somebody with a major neurocognitive disorder that needs a protected environment, you're probably going to get the highest. But if it's just because you need some help changing your bed sheets and getting the mail, you're not going to get as much. There's community-based adult services. We kind of walked through some of that. That's where you've got your PACE programs, you've got other type of benefits that are available for support out in the community. So again, like day programs and others like transportation and things like that. Medi-Cal also pays for skilled nursing facilities. It's not just some scary places that you get bed bugs at, right? Some of the nicest places in town, they don't advertise, but they do take Medi-Cal. So be mindful of when you're looking for one. It's usually in a crisis in a hospital. Do some research on them. They also have an assisted living waiver program. It's a program in which if you're in a skilled nursing, you have priority, and there's limited beds. There's, I think, 7,500 beds in California, and not all counties have it right now. San Diego County does. But it's a program in which there are a lot of assisted living facilities in San Diego that will accept Medi-Cal. The wait list is between 7 and 11 months at any given time. And so it's kind of hard to say what's available when, but it is an option, and it's a good option. It's actually a great option for a lot of people. So how do we become eligible for Medi-Cal? All right, this is when I'm saying there are major changes. AB 133 phase 1. So, oh gosh, time flies. I have no sense of time anymore. In July 1st of 2022, California implemented a rule that we used to have a $2,000 asset cap to qualify for Medi-Cal. We now have a $130,000 asset cap. So meaning you can have $130,000 in your bank, you can have a home of any value, you can have all your household goods and personal effects. By the way, nobody here has jewelry. We all have heirlooms because those are exempt. You get one vehicle, you can have term life insurance, burial plots, IRAs, and work-related pensions, so long as they're in payout status. That's like if you're 72 and a half and you're taking your requirement and distributions, it is no longer countable. If you're under that, there is a way to create a payment structure that also makes it exempt. So when you're looking at this list, wait a second. So I have a client who has $128,000 in the bank. They have a home in Del Mar worth $3.8 million, and they have $2 million in their IRA, and they qualify for Medi-Cal. Are you kidding me? No, I'm not kidding you. They do. So look at the list. It's not exhaustive either. So, but this is the most common things. And so that says a lot right there. And so the next slide. What's happening though, post January 1st of 2022. So Assembly Bill, that was AB 133, phase 2. So it has not been approved by the federal government yet. So you hear me. I'm, last bullet point, waiting on final written approval from the federal Department of Health and Human Services. However, California has the law on the books. I have been told that California is working on new forms and new regulations that will implement on January 1st, 2024, the asset test entirely. So I believe that there has been word from the federal government, but we don't have anything in writing yet. So you can't take my word for it. You can't say, well, Attorney Kimberly McGhee said it will be this way. Don't say that. Say that I'm letting you know that I have been informed that it's very, very, very likely. So the Department of Healthcare Services is currently, and it's on their website, so it's overseeing ongoing updates to all necessary forms, notices, letters, regulations, and materials regarding asset limit policies. That's from their website. So it's not been approved because, again, I said it was a state and federal program. What do I mean by that? We need the federal money to approve it in order to do it. So if we do, that means that regardless of what you have in the bank, you will qualify for Medi-Cal if you qualify on an income level. So next slide. So spousal protections right now. We're going to get to income in a second, but the community spouse resource allowance, as I told you, their Medi-Cal was implemented to protect the pauperization of spouses. So right now, the Medi-Cal will allow the well spouse, the spouse that's at home, to keep $148,620, and the sick spouse $130,000. So together combined, they can have, you got the lawyer doing math, $278,620, if I did the math right, plus the home, the IRA, the car, all of those things. The reason we have that is because the community, the at-home spouse, the well spouse, needs to retain a certain amount of money to live off of, right? We're California. We are not Kentucky. And no offense to Kentucky, but our cost of living is completely different. So that's one of the reasons. And it's going to increase every year according to the Consumer Price Index. However, if on January 1st of 2024, we get rid of the asset limit and the asset cap, this is not going to be relevant anymore. So there's also an income issue, right? If your income is below 138% of the federal poverty level, which I believe right now is 1,650, I'm not going to get it right, around between 1,600 and 1,700. That is where you qualify for Medi-Cal with no share of cost. But if you're married, Then there's something called the MIMNA, the minimum monthly maintenance needs allowance. That's the number that Medi-Cal says that's the limit where a spouse can't live with anything less. So if you have, as a combined couple, $3,500 in income, Medi-Cal is going to let you keep it all and still qualify for Medi-Cal. In an easy way to say it. There's a math problem that we have to do with all of it, but that's kind of an easy way to say it. If the sick spouse has $10,000 in income, then Medi-Cal is going to take the difference between that and the total of $37,550. So it's just a math problem that we kind of work out. But I want the numbers out there so people realize that they're there, right? When they say, "Oh, I wouldn't qualify because I have $2,500 in Social Security," well, you might. Okay, so that's kind of the idea. Next slide. So what does this mean, right? I just kind of gave all the numbers. How do we plan? Like, what do we do? So the reason why we plan is we want to avoid or minimize the spend down. So the spend down, what is that? Until the January 1st change, if it happens, spending down would be getting rid of that excess cash, right? So if you're a single person and you have $150,000 in the bank, you won't qualify. So with planning, maybe we can create a better plan where that money could go, because in California, we can do things here to transfer things out of people's estates that you can't do in any other state. So I don't like to talk about it on this one because I don't want people dabbling in it, because it can have serious repercussions, but a qualified elder law attorney can walk you through those processes. Asset protection, right? There's a way to protect it. I just taught, in the earlier slide, I talked about something called estate recovery and how to prevent it. The reason why you need to plan is it's not just because you want to avoid probate, but Medi-Cal, if we get rid of the asset cap, a lot more people are going to be qualified for Medi-Cal. And one of the major reasons is because skilled nursing facilities, they don't really have an income cap. And we don't know what the law is going to look like. So this could be different after January 1st. But the idea is what they do for skilled nursing is they take 100% of your income minus $35 if you qualify on the asset level. Well, if there's no asset cap, I don't know what that really means yet. So we don't have the regulations yet. But the way I've heard it's going to happen is that's what's going to happen. So if I have, $4,000 a month in income and there's no asset cap and I go to a skilled nursing, in theory, my share of cost, my copay through Medi-Cal could be $3,965 a month, and then Medi-Cal will cover it. I don't know if that's going to be the way it is, but it might. And it's very likely, actually, the way I've been hearing about it. But how is this going to work? So Medi-Cal, when they pay for something, especially if they pay for your skilled nursing, when you die, they're going to try to recover from your estate. But Medi-Cal cannot recover from an estate unless it's your probate estate. That was one of the reasons we talked about probate early on. Again, probate is when you just have a will and you've got a house and you have to go through the court system and the judge decides who can do things. That probate estate, when you die and you've been receiving Medi-Cal, for instance, at a skilled nursing, you have to let Medi-Cal know. And then they send a letter saying, well, we've paid X amount of dollars for your care and we want it back from your estate. If you have a spouse, they will not collect. A living spouse, they will not collect. And they can only collect from your probate estate. So if you have a trust, that doesn't go to probate. That's why you want to get a trust, right? The asset protection side of it is very important. There's a lot of times I was arguing about this because I feel like this is more of, the people who have the financial wherewithal to go see a lawyer, they're the ones that benefit. And that's where I try to tell people that trusts aren't for rich people, right? Rich people, they do have fancy trusts and they do all, but they create corporations and do even more stuff. The average consumer in California, the average person has to have trust. If you own a home in California, you have to have trust. That is just my sweeping statement, because in case you need Medi-Cal, You want to protect that home. That home can never be taken from you by Medi-Cal if you have it in a trust. That is the rule. I got to say never, because they could change the rule, but that is the current rule. So please talk to a planner about it. Make sure, you know, I know there's LegalZoom and there's all these things, but make sure you do it right. I have a lot of clients that come in after passing that, you know, they did it through like an online program, or they went to an attorney who kind of dabbled in it, and no offense to that person, but they didn't fund the trust, right? And by not funding the trust, now you have to go to court and have it done, and I just be mindful. So be careful, but that's the reason why we want to plan. Protecting eligibility for multiple benefits, right? Where Medi-Cal is changing, but social SSI is not changing, and other types of federal programs aren't changing. So we do want to make sure that we still work with all the programs, because if somebody's ill, you want to maximize all those benefits. You want to get everything you can, because it's expensive and it's exhausting. And major neurocognitive disorder diseases are long. They're not short, and they're expensive. So you kind of want to make sure that you protect your eligibility for different ones, and you maximize the benefits that are available. We also always want to protect the community spouse, right? That is the purpose of Medi-Cal plans. One of the reasons the reason I got into it. I want to make sure that that spouse is protected. I also want to make sure that the legacy planning is done as well, right? Wealth transfer is the only way to keep the next generation off of benefits. Not entirely, but it's a very common way. And that's why Medi-Cal, and I mean the federal Medicaid, they acknowledge that transfer of the home to the next generation is an important way to keep the next generation off of benefits in the event of, you know, they're unable to, you know, work, or whatever the environment it may be. So it's important to do that. And there's a reason why these benefits are created that way. They weren't created in a vacuum, and they weren't created without mindfulness. So use it. And so if we do plan, you can minimize the share of costs, which is what I was talking about. One of the things we're doing on the elder law side is kind of working with planners and other professionals because it's going to now be an income-based program. Are we going to have to start converting assets from income producing to non-income producing? And what does that look like? And we just don't know yet. This is all so new. So, you know, we're working on it on the back end side of this. We're brainstorming, and we're trying to come up with good plans to keep everybody as protected as possible. Right. So let's go to the questions.
Okay, Kim, there was a question here just from one of the attendees, just saying Medi-Cal is telling them they can't come in and provide any, you know, financial help for this family because they have more than $2,000. So how do you get Medi-Cal approved? How do you get, you know?
I'm looking for that question. Oh, Medi-Cal says they can't pay for any help because they have more than 2,000. No, they're wrong. The asset cap is $130,000. SSI is still $2,000. The problem you might have is that there's too much income. And so if they had less than $2,000, they'd qualify maybe for SSI, and you'd get Medi-Cal automatically. And that might be where the issue is. But it's an asset cap of 130,000. But if it's an individual, the income cap is going to be that 1657 or whatever the exact number is. It's a very low number. So that might be the issue. And depending if both, like maybe if you're married and you've got the MIMNA, if both spouse needs Medi-Cal, then it's like $2,200 is the income. So that I think might be the issue, is it's an income issue, not an asset issue.
Okay, and then if dad qualifies for Medi-Cal due to supplemental Social Security, can that extend to IHSS for mom?
So if dad is on Medi-Cal for SSI, then mom, so if they're married, and I'm not a Social Security specialist, so I would say definitely talk to somebody who is, but if they're married, their joint income applies for SSI. So mom should also be on Medi-Cal. And then, yes, if you're qualified for Medi-Cal, you can apply for IHSS, which is just the phone call online.
Yeah.
You just go online and find the phone number. I find it weird though that dad would be on Medi-Cal and not mom because they're a joint household. And they consider the joint household when they're looking at qualifications.
Oh, hopefully that is helpful to whoever asked. Yeah, and good points there. And then another question here about if they eliminate the asset test and you have investment properties, that you rent out, should you sell them?
Well, I'm not telling anybody to do anything. I am telling everybody that they need to get a plan. They need to work with the qualified professionals to figure it out, right? Because that's something, so be careful. Don't just sell rental properties, investment properties, because you're going to have a capital gain problem, right? So you have to kind of look at all of these factors. Nothing can be looked at in a vacuum. So, and then you want to, I have a lot of people that have come to me after seeing like dabblers in this area of law. And, they liquidated things to qualify, and they moved all their assets around, but they incurred $183,000 of capital gain expenses and taxes they paid, like 183 out of pocket they paid. Well, by the time they came to see me 5 years later, or 3 years later, whatever it was, mom still hadn't even been on Medi-Cal. So they paid this incredible amount of money in taxes and still hadn't even gotten a benefit. So when we're creating a plan, you want to look at like, okay, how much am I going to spend? How much is this going to cost? And what am I potentially going to get? Because, right, a lot of times you don't want to become dependent on Medi-Cal. You want to kind of create a plan to keep you out of some of these programs at the same time. You just want to be able to maximize the best thing. So no, don't just go sell assets and, and stick them in a non-interest bearing account. That might not be the plan. Or it might be, depending on what the numbers pan out to look like. So that's kind of the idea. I think that this is long-term care planning in the Medi-Cal world is really going to involve the legal planner, the financial planner, and the CPA all at once. We still always have a CPA involved when we're doing this planning, but I think we're going to be bringing in financial planners that have different type of investments that are less income producing. I still don't know yet. We're still working on that side.
If the spouse is on SSDI, Social Security Disability Income, not SSI, will they still qualify for Medi-Cal?
So if the spouse is on SSDI, then there should be Medicare coverage. And then the qualifications for Medi-Cal is going to be based on the joint household income. So it just depends. So, because SSDI is just an income source. So it just kind of depends on what the income is at that point. So it's not an automatic.
All right. And just a couple of quick questions going back to really legal documents. Can people just use the download power of attorney forms and sign them and get them notarized? Is that good enough and keep them with their trusts?
Yep. I always tell people I really like the advanced healthcare directive from some of the hospitals that we have here. I want to say, I know I like Kaiser's, I like Scripps. I like the ones that are more robust, the ones that kind of walk you through a lot of questions so that you're not just like, hey, this person can make my life decisions and yes, I want my plug pulled, right? I like the ones that kind of walk you through a lot of hypotheticals. So that's just my person. But yes, you can definitely do that. I know there's powers of attorney, durable power of attorney for asset management. Those you can find online. The one problem with those is they're statutory. So they're limited to the statute only. And there's a lot of other things that you might want in them. So I do recommend for at least the power of attorney for asset management to speak with an actual lawyer to see if you need the additional things. Like for us elder law attorneys, we put long-term care planning, like moving assets around and all the benefits. California is just California. So we have all of these things. Well, if it's not specifically stated, you don't have that power. So it's a little more difficult than that, but definitely for the healthcare.
All right. Another quick question. This came in chat. It's just saying that the attendee did not understand when you said that the lawyer or online lawyer is not funded. Legal's it.
So one of the concerns I have is when you go to like a dabbling attorney, and that's not a nice way to say it, but an attorney that's not an estate planner, and this is not across the board by any means, because there are phenomenal contract attorneys that do estate planning. I'm just saying, I end up dealing with a lot of the problems. And so I have a lot of experience with, if you do like a online, like a Rocket Lawyer or LegalZoom, you get the documents, but then you have to fund it, everything correctly and properly. And so you have to, you know, most estate planners, you go to an estate attorney, part of the job is you draft the trust, you draft the powers of attorney, and you draft the deed, and you get the deed recorded so that the house properly transfers to the trust, which is the whole point of the trust. And so we see a lot of times when you go through the online processes, or you go to somebody who doesn't truly do this for a living on a daily basis, that they miss that important part, which is a trust is worth the paper it's written on if you don't put anything in it. So funding your trust is the most important part of the trust. And that part is missed a lot of times.
Okay, good. And one last quick question. Did you say that payments to memory care facilities are tax deductible?
They can be, right? It's a medical expense depending on and I will never be a CPA. I'm not your tax professional. I do not have an LLM in tax. I do not want to know about your taxes. I don't want to do your taxes. But yes, you want to talk to a qualified CPA because it could be a qualified medical expense for purposes of deductions.
Very good. All right, let's carry on here. We've got a little bit more information to cover. Next steps and additional resources.
Okay, so next steps, what do we do? Right now, you know all the reasons why we want to do this stuff. So we want to gather it, right? The more if you have everything in one place, the better, right? I work inland in North County, so there's a lot of fires around here. So I always say, please put everything together in one spot and run out the door with it. Put it in a fire safe and, you know, bag and run out the door. But the idea is, you know, you want to gather all this stuff, because how do you plan if you don't know what you have? So you want to put it all together. You really want to keep copies of all the legal documents in one place. I can't tell you how many times it's like we open the binder and the powers of attorney are missing. And sometimes we find them in a, you know, manila envelope in the filing cabinet. Sometimes we don't find them at all. So keep them all together in one place. If you take them out, put them back in. But why are you taking them out? Right? You should be taking the binder with you. If somebody needs it, take it, let them scan it, and then you put it back in the binder. Please tell somebody where they are. Gosh, it's so important. Paying the money to get them done, going through the emotional gymnastics to get it done, and then not telling somebody where they are, biggest mistake you're going to get, right? Tell somebody where it is. I mean, I had clients who just really didn't trust their loved ones with it because they had professionals listed and everything. But what they did is they told their family members who has it, right? Like their attorney has it, or this person, their CPA has it, or somebody else has it. You know, create and update the plans, right? You want to create them first, then you want to keep them updated. Like I told you, every 5 years, every major life event, health, birth, death, things like that. Please talk to your agents. I can't stress that enough. Please talk to your agents. Tell them what you want your life to look like. Like some people are like, I'm fine living in a community. Other people, the idea of being trapped in their home with a home care is horrible to them. And other people are like, I'm never leaving my home under any circumstance. So find out what people are, talk about it, tell people who you are. And then we'll find out what people need to have on file. Right? I've run into situations where people have like a Fidelity or Vanguard or some sort of investment account, and they needed their own power of attorney on file, not the ones that are statutory by California or statutory by Arizona, but their own specific one. So reach out to the institutions that are in charge of your assets and find out what they need. So important. Legal and financial planning outside of California. So lawyers are licensed for each individual state. Like I'm licensed in California, Nevada. I don't practice much in Nevada anymore. So I always refer that out because I don't want to keep up with the certain laws because there's a lot and things change regularly. So you want to seek counsel that's licensed in the state where people are, right? I had a client we were going to do some really intensive Medi-Cal planning for. And then right when we were about to finish or start really, I found out she was going to move to Virginia. And I said, okay, well, we can't do it. And she said, why? I said, because there are so many different rules. And California, we are an island to ourselves. So if there is going to be moving, we like to, or potential moving, we like to work with people from those different states to make sure what we're doing, number one, won't impact abilities there, or will at least work together. And so, it's just really important when you're thinking about that. Next slide. Now, resources. So I sold the Advanced Healthcare Directive. There's one on the Attorney General's website. Again, I tend to like the ones through the hospitals better, but that's just me. The POLST form, the Physician's Order for Life-Sustaining Treatment. I like this website. So if you go to the Coalition for Compassionate Care of California, it's really good because they have a lot of good resources on there. And they kind of explain what it is. I'm a big fan. The Consumer's Toolkit for Healthcare Advanced Planning, the American Bar Association, it's great. Because you want to go through the types of questions, right? If this is your first time going through it, most likely it is, you don't know the right questions. So use these resources to do it. And then Compassion and Choices, dementia provisions for advanced directives are great. California, we are contemplating some updating to our mental health issues, which I think that we might be able to get neurocognitive disorders in there as well, so that you can have more control. But like places like Oregon has more control than you do down here. But it's good to know what there is and what you want to specifically look for. Next slide. Legal services, NALA, so National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. I was former president of Southern California National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. NALA is the best source for finding elder law attorneys in your local area or state, because being an elder law attorney is hard, meaning there's no like magic book. And so we get a lot of our education through NALA. We also get it through National Elder Law Foundation, in the idea that NELF, which is the National Elder Law Foundation, is what governs my national elder law certificate. So I am a CELA, certified elder law attorney, and NELF is who certifies me. The State Bar of California has a tremendous trust in estates section, meaning that it's now a California Lawyers Association, but it's kind of, you want to make sure you go through the bar, make sure they're a licensed attorney. You can check disciplinary on people. So you can say, this person seems a little, and then you look them up. Oh, well, they've been disciplined a lot. That explains it. San Diego County Bar Association, there's a legal referral service through them. So it's they have different sub bars too. So you can kind of see if you need somebody of a certain type. Canner. Now, California Advocates for Nursing Home Reform. This website, everything I talked about today is on there and then some. Canner is the only California specific place that I would ever direct somebody to get all of this information, every article, all the exact numbers. They even have examples of how to do the math problems to figure out what my share of cost would be, what my copay would be if I did end up on Medi-Cal and had to be in a nursing home. Like it's really good. And they also have, they can help the public too. It's not, you don't have to, I'm an attorney member, but you can actually just call them for help. And when I'm stuck on a client, I call them for help and, they help. So it's a really good organization for just when you're in trouble on this stuff or just need advice. You also have the California Department of Social Services, licensing, public health. These are the things you want to look up if you're looking at facilities. You want to see if they've been, if there's any violations, if there's any issues with a specific caregiver or specific facility. So you kind of want to always keep these in your back pocket, because you go to them, you put someplace in, you're like, oh, they have all these violations. I do like to give a warning. Sometimes you'll look and they'll say oh my God, there's a lot of violations, but you have to look at the different levels. There's A, B, and C. And I've seen people get a lot of violations because like their water heater was 1 degree too hot. And I mean, well, yes, they have to fall within the regulations. I feel like that's a little bit much. But then there's other ones where I know somebody, a really good facility got a violation because they had misfiled a caregiver's TB test. It was in the folder for the person behind it. And so when they were going through the file, they saw it and they got a violation for it. I mean, I thought that was a bit much too. But then there's some real ones, so you want to look at them, but be mindful that sometimes they can be that simple. And then you've got your benefit programs, right? Medicare.gov, Medicare, Center for Medicare Advocacy.org. I can't speak more highly for them. I have not known how to do things, and I've had a client come in and I'm just like, I have no idea how to help you, but I'll figure it out because you're just too adorable and I can't. And I've gone there, I've called them up and I'm like, how do I do this? And they've walked me through it. And now I can do things, and they're available to the public. And they'll give you all these self-help things, and they'll give you the forms. And so they're a great advocate, great place. Social Security Administration, the compassionate allowances, if you applies, use it. And then you've got your Medi-Cal and your VA caregiver support program. And this is me. This is what I do. And I really want to thank you all. I know I see a few more questions, so I think I'd like to touch on those. I know we're running over. I just talked too much. I'm sorry.
It's always so good and informative, Kim.
I
So
know.
we do have a couple questions. So you can see if you have minimal assets and you want to put together a trust, can you give us a ballpark figure of how much you would expect to pay an attorney?
If you're thinking, if it's like a full estate plan, so like for me, we just don't like do trust one-offs because I feel like that'd be malpractice at this point. So, like a full estate plan, like a trust certification, a pour over will, power of attorney for healthcare, power of attorney for asset management, the deed funding the trust, the package. And then there's some ancillary documents, which your head will explode if I keep going down the line. But I've seen them ranging from 1,500 to like 5,000. And, a lot of times, you kind of got to look like coastal versus inland. Some people need more complex tax planning. I've seen like $15,000 for trust. Generally, they are flat feed. Some people charge hourly, so it just kind of depends. But like for me, I think right now for a single person trust package, the whole thing, we're like 2,500 plus the recording charges. So like the $42 or $32 or whatever it's going to be to record the deed. And I think we're on the low end. But I know the coast is more expensive, and we're inland, so it makes our rent is cheaper, and it kind of makes a difference. Okay, can a non-married living girlfriend for 40 years receive veterans benefits if they're never married? No, that's just an easy answer. No. You have to be married. And in fact, when you're applying for VA benefits, and this has actually been a bar for some people, you have to walk through every marriage of the veteran and the spouse their whole life. And I had one client this veteran was married and divorced or widowed 4 times, and the surviving spouse was married or widowed 5 times. And we had to list each and every date of marriage, termination of marriage, and proof of all of it. And that was a nightmare. But yeah, it has to be married, and they want you to prove it. So the reason why you have to go through that whole rigmarole is because they need to make sure that every prior marriage terminated properly so that the next marriage was valid. So even if you thought you were married for 40 years, but you weren't because the marriage was never properly terminated in Texas, that's a real case. It doesn't count.
Very good. Okay, I think we're wrapping up here. This is just a quick reminder of, all the different things we offer at Alzheimer's San Diego. Oops, I'm so sorry, guys. So in addition to our educational programs like this one, we have lots of other stuff going on. And one of the things that's important for all of you to know is that you can speak with anyone on our clinical services team from Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 5 p.m. And there's just a wealth of information and resources at hand there. And we can help families problem solve and identify resources that they need, and get you referred to people like Kim for the other support and services that you need from local professionals. So, and I'm going to just quickly put in the chat that we have a follow-up form that you can complete if you would like. Click on the link, and that goes straight to our clinical services team, so that if you have a situation or scenario going on that you want some specific advice or guidance on, just fill that out, and one of the team members will get back to you.
And I'm gonna highly recommend that everybody here do that. And you know, Alzheimer's, dementia, major neurocognitive disorders, they're very isolating diseases.
Mhm.
And you know, you have no idea what you don't know. And you have no idea how much there is to help you. And this again, there's no way to make this a better process, but you can make it less hard. And I promise you, the reason why I do this for Alzheimer's San Diego is because they offer such tremendous services and they're a resource. Maybe they can't help you with their specific issue, but they can get you to the person who can. And you know, having a little bit of emotional support through this, you have no idea how much that saves you in the long run.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. And, you know, all of our programs and services are at no cost. So, and then of course you can access our website or call us at the phone number listed here. So just a reminder that everybody that has attended here today will get an email with a copy of the slides that were presented today, and that the webinar was recorded and it will be posted in our webinar library in probably about 10 days. Okay. So that's it. Kim, thank you so much. I was busy writing notes as you were talking, and that's why sometimes the slides were slow to advance, because I was still writing notes.
And thank you everybody for being patient with our technology problems today.
No, yeah. And so your time and expertise here today is just always valued, and thank you very much for doing this for us here today. Good to know all these updates for sure.
Thank you.
All right, so that's it for today, folks. Enjoy the rest of your day, and don't hesitate to reach out either to Kim, you know, with questions about your specific legal and financial situation with regards to what she's talked about, and to us for any kind of help and support you may need. Okay. All right. That is it, and we'll see you later.